I feel like you're like me, and the sense of like these are her words, where she was like, you think that if you just could have the time to sit across from somebody with a coffee and explain everything, you could like get them on your side, or you could get them to understand like why you are behind in your life, or why you don't have this or that, or why, because then it's really like to not be judged, or to like protect yourself from rejection, or to like unreject or whatever. And even though that like the thing is, it's like, it might be true. Like I might be able to be like, let me tell you exactly why I was late, or but it doesn't really matter, because everybody has their own perception of a situation. And I even might be able to change their perception maybe, but like, A, it's not controllable. And B, it takes so much energy that it's really just not worth it. And that was a kind of watershed way to put that for me. And I think it does kind of relate to what I'm saying about sharing writing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there was a real relief for me when I learned that not only can I not control what other people think of me, which we always hear, but that it's actually impossible to make everyone like me. Like that impossibility is very freeing. But that being said, like all revelations, like try putting it into practice, try living it every day, right? I mean, there's the moment of enlightenment, and then there, with on any subject, and then there's like the integration of it, which are two very different things, which I also think, just like to circle back around to what we were talking about, wellness, right? Like we want that moment of enlightenment to like last forever. And like, we're like, I'm healed. But the hard part is the integration of those revelations. But I mean, like all character defects, it's extremely human, right? Like, and even with things that we see are flaws, they're probably like the flip side of some great gift of ours. But yeah, I think with writing, one thing that we learn when we put our work out there is not only is it impossible to make everyone like us, but that people are going to interpret our words like as they are going to interpret them. One of my favorite things is when people, like, occasionally I'll have like a university student do like a thesis or a paper on my work, and they'll see things and metaphors and symbols that I did not see, but I'm like, oh my God, you're entirely right. And I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea consciously when I was writing it that this was the case.
That's so cool.
Super cool. It's very fun. Or like recently someone DM'd me on Twitter and they were like, this is Theo from the Merman. Like this is like, how Theo is this? And it was like a picture of a merman, but he had a beard. And I was like, well, Theo doesn't have a beard. But then I'm like, wait, of course Theo must have a beard. Like, where's he going to get Theo's the merman in the
Yeah.
Pisces for, which is, and I'm like, where would he get a razor in the ocean? Like, of course he has a beard. Like, she's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I think that integration it's kind of like what you often speak about on wanting to stay in the high of something, or wanting to stay in like the diet starts tomorrow is like such a great high, or anything before integration. Cause it's like, I think Nada has a short story called this too, of like my new life. I think about that a lot. And
Hmm.
that was my trajectory with a lot of wellness stuff, was getting into it so young. Like I think in one of these essays in my little zine I made was like, I was contemplating like all of these tables I laid on, and all these treatments I'd had before I'd like had casual sex, or like stayed up late, or like done anything that I would have wanted to do in my 20s or my early 20s. But I wasn't really like, A, I didn't really need it. B, like, does anybody really need it? And then like C, I wasn't integrating any of it because I was just ravenous for it as like spiritual entertainment. And I think like I'm not special. That's probably a very common experience. But I realized that I felt overwhelmed all the time because I was constantly taking in new information and new ideas and new systems when I just needed to integrate one. But like that was that's not fun. There's no high from that. That's like a long-term relationship with a practice, I wanted the limerence.
Totally. Exactly. The newness, the excitement. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read the zine.
I'll send you one with your sticker
Yes.
and some other stuff. But let's like stay in the Pisces for a minute and this topic of limerence, because one of the central questions, I think, is, you talk about how you were trying to reckon with, when you were writing that, I think, why a healthy long-term relationship doesn't feel as intoxicating as some of the relationships that are at a distance or might kill you or are fraught. And I think it's kind of similar to what I was saying in terms of like taking in things like that, but or content or ideas. But you've said before, which I love, like it's hard to be in limerence with someone you're buying toilet paper with. So
Yes.
can you unpack that a little bit? And do you think there are ways to do that, or how do you do that, or what is the something else that you do to enjoy a long-term relationship?
Well, I think one thing I've learned about long-term relationships. So I've been with my husband since I guess we've been together for like 21 years, which is a really long time. We met when I was 24 and I'm 45 now. And we had an open marriage for a chunk of that. And we were monogamous before that. And then we've been monogamous since that period, since that era. But one thing I've learned about long-term relationships is that it comes back around. So, there can be long stretches where there's not that same type of desire or limerence. And that being said, like, I don't think you just like sort of let it go. Like, I think it's like a plant, like you have to continue to water it. But like, there are seasons where like there's no blooms, right? And there's not that, but like the plant is very much still alive, but it's not like as maybe sexy as like, this is really stretching the plant metaphor, but it's not as sexy as like fresh as a bouquet. And like the bouquet is going to die, right? Like a bouquet, you get a bouquet. It's like beautiful and it's exciting, and then it's going to die. Whereas like a plant, let's say there is a rose bush, right? Like there are periods where the rose bush like has no blooms on it. It's all green. It's all thorns, but inevitably it comes back around and there are blooms again. And so it's like, how can you compare, like when there's no blooms on the rose bush, how can you compare that to a fresh bouquet? But then it's like, look at the bouquet of roses like 10 days later and it's dead. Whereas like the rose bush is still alive. It just might not have the flowers on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm just like taking that in. That was beautiful.
Thanks.
I think it was really interesting to revisit your work this week, because some of it that I had read so long ago and I hadn't read since. And I realized that I hadn't had experiences that I hadn't been able to relate really. And this time I could, which was interesting. And it was particularly with limerence. And yeah, I just, it's kind of the opposite of, or I don't know. What do you think? Like, if you've talked about like missing the limerence of a relationship, that the relationship itself wasn't good. And I've been in a stretch of that recently where I know enough to know that when I'm missing someone or the closeness that I had with someone, but I took that as far as I could. And I know it's a dead end. And I know that when I'm feeling that way, it's a symptom of something else. It's not because I actually should be with them or reach out or anything like that. But I still have to have one side of my brain instruct the other side. It's sort of the opposite. Like, is limerence the opposite of nostalgia being longing for a time you knew you could survive? Like, is limerence maybe longing for a time that was chaotic and the high? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, like love, as they say, love is a drug, but like it quite literally is a drug. It lights up parts of our brain, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, especially new love. So quite literally, it can sort of help us to be like lifted or elevated out of what ails, because we're getting this rush of chemicals that function similarly to the way like a drug might function. So that being said, like the way that there can be, the way that like a person can have like a one night where on ecstasy, that's incredible, and then spend like the rest of their lives like chasing that high. And so there's euphoric recall, right? But let's say like the night of ecstasy, like the following day or the days after, like were followed by like depression and like sort of the chemical payoff ultimate that you get from MDMA, like, let's say like it wasn't worth it, but like that person can continually be having euphoric recall of like the moment and but of the like night of ecstasy, but like not of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a lot about euphoric recall, right? And the desire for escape.
Yeah, it's so intense. And I wonder, I don't know, I'm just sort of having this thought for the first time. If I don't think I would trade it. Like, I don't think right now, like that with the example I was just mentioning, that's like the most recent. It was like, I would call it like complex limerence perhaps, but whatever that, the come down of that was, or less limerence and more like, yeah, just the intimacy come down or whatever. And I, I think that, when it's painful, the come down, you kind of wish you'd never tasted the drug. But
Yeah.
I also am like, I don't know. I think I do want to have tasted the drug, like, do you feel like it's worth having the experience knowing you're going to have that recall, or is it better to, steer clear?
I think it depends on how big of an addict you are.
Yeah.
But I think like all experiences like end up leading us to where we are and who we are. And so in that sense, sometimes I think it can take like hitting bottom. Like, I think there's no definitive, right? There's no definitive. It depends on the person. It depends on the person and it depends on the experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I have one for you then, because interestingly, I was about to say, we talk about, and this is the first time we were ever speaking, that like everything's parasocial with you, but I've heard you talk about this, and it's something that we also share, just, and everyone maybe shares, just how hard it is being in a body, aging in a body, and being in a body where you have to eat and that's something that you can't abstain from. And I think you have to do a harm reduction model on that one. And I wrote this article for Refinery 29 many years ago, but it was in like 2015, I think. And it went maybe 2014, but at that time it was like very easy to go viral, but it went like, I was still living in Michigan at the time. And I remember I like came out of a class and the Daily Mail had picked it up and Yahoo, and it was everywhere. But the headline that everyone picked up was anorexia nostalgia. And it was like, girl has anorexia nostalgia. And like, how crazy that was. And apparently that is an actual term that I didn't know about. I just wrote how I felt, but it's like this exact thing of and now that we're talking about this, I wonder like if I hadn't ever started the drug of like being in a body that was underweight for what I should be, or not even like at my lowest, but like just in general, like if I hadn't tasted that and the external validation from people and the high of it and the clothes fitting sample size or whatever it is, like, would I have gotten comfortable in a different size and made that work? Or, and again, like it's maybe like not fruitful to go down that path and just be like, every experience makes you, but it is sort of interesting to wonder about,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like talk about euphoric recall, right? Like when you remember that, it's like remembering the sort of like high of fitting into a sample size, but not remembering like the sort of the agony of, having to constantly be thinking about what is going in your mouth and like the counting, which like is all, the math.
But we're good at adding.
Yes, very. Our algebra is on point.
Unfortunately. Well, okay, that brings us to, we're in the milk fed era. We're here.
Yes.
We'll call this that. I mean, you've said before, and I deeply relate, and I think the first time I felt so, just this comes up in So Sad Today as well, and other places too. But you said the longest relationship that you have is your fraught relationship with food. Can you talk about that a little bit, and like how, you've spoken about being an addict and being sober in other areas, but I'd love to hear about, the process addiction of this one. And do you feel like it's the trickiest of any sort of addiction?
It's definitely for me like the longest going because as you pointed out, like with alcohol or drugs, you can sort of put the plug in the jug and abstain, right? But like there's no abstaining from eating. So it's a constant flux and there's a lot of room to both sort of step back into the addiction and at the same time or to like heal, right? Like there's it's I think it's like there's a broader continuum because of the nature of needing to feed oneself. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was like food. Like I started from a very young age of really like from possibly birth of having a mother who was like obsessed with what I ate, like to a point where I'm actually sort of revisiting some of that and being like, oh my God, like that was pretty, that was abusive just because of the constant pervasive nature of the pressure and control. Like it was really the religion of my household. And so I really started out with the desire to binge eat because it was what I couldn't have. And that then sort of in so I was like a binge eater as a kid, and then that led me into like feeling like I needed a total draconian control, which led me into anorexia, and then sort of a hybrid of restriction and binging in my 20s. And then I think like in my mid 20s, when I actually got sober from drugs and alcohol, I was probably like the healthiest I ever was with food. And then like since then, like, it's been sort of this, I guess, back and forth, not I would where with not like anorexia and not binging, but definitely like different levels of comfort in my own body and comfort with food and more sort of I think I'm more in the middle, which is great, but it's still very much it's not like I don't know that I'll ever be like an intuitive eater, whatever that mystical person unicorn is.
Yeah. Have you read I feel like you probably know it, but have you read the Ellen Satter definition of normal eating?
No.
Maybe I might pull it up and read it to you. I might even have it memorized, but I bet I have it handy because I return to it a lot. But I think I had to get to some acceptance that like that's just not going to be in the cards for me, at least forever, I think. But it is beautiful as an idea. I'm going to see if I can find it because I'd be curious what you think. I found it. I'm just going to read this really quick. It says, normal eating is going to the table hungry and eating till you're satisfied. It is being able to choose foods you like to eat and truly eat enough of it, not just stop because you think you should. Normal eating is being able to give some thought to your selection of food to get nutritious food, but not being too weary and restrictive that you miss out on enjoyable food. Normal eating is giving yourself permission to eat sometimes because you are happy, sad, or bored, or just because it feels good to eat. Normal eating is 3 meals a day, or 4, or 5, or choosing to munch along the way. It is leaving some cookies on the plate because you know you can have more tomorrow, or it is eating more now because they taste so wonderful and they're warm. Normal eating is overeating at times, feeling stuffed and uncomfortable, and it is undereating at times, wishing you had more. Normal eating is trusting your body to make up for your mistakes in eating. Normal eating takes up some of your time and attention, but it knows its place as only one important area of your life. In short, normal eating is flexible. It varies in response to your hunger, your schedule, and your proximity to food and your feelings.
That's really good. That's also, I'm like, wow, what an order.
I know, exactly. I'm like, I love it and I want it for everyone. I don't even want to necessarily like, I'm like, do it, please do it. Do as she says, not as I do, like it's not what it's been for me, but that it's a printout that somebody handed me on like the first day of in treatment eating disorder, like years ago. And I think having something so far away from where I am as the goal was just too big of a leap, I mean, it's nice and I love it, but I think it's gray area, I think it's like needing to know that it's going to be in the middle for life. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I'm someone who eats like a lot of fake foods. Like I eat just like I love like crappy fake foods, and I love like knowing what, like how many calories are in something. And often things that come with a label and a barcode are fake, right? But like recently I kind of had the revelation like, oh, maybe like if I ate more like food and not like not foods, I might feel better mental health wise. Like, oh, the body is made of like vitamins and natural resources. That's kind of interesting. And also, like, oh, food is energy. Like, if I don't eat enough, then like I'm not going to have energy. You know what it came from? It
Yeah.
came from, I have this niece who I'm obsessed with, and she's 4.5. And I heard her father say to her, all right, like breakfast so that you have enough energy, which like I'm sure everyone's parent, like a lot of people's parents have said to them. But like I don't think my mother ever said anything like that to me, you know, and or my father, because my father was trying to kind of make up for like the deprivation that my mother enacted. So it was sort of like with my father, eating was like all about pleasure, right? And with my mother, it was all about like being okay in some weird way through deprivation, but it was never about like eating for energy. And so while this is like not revelatory probably to like most people, to me it was like I was like, wait, I deserve to feed myself. Like, and I sort of started thinking about myself as like a, not like my inner child or the way I was as a child or a baby, but like thinking about conceiving of myself like at like that, like how would I feed a child? How would I feed a baby? And like I wouldn't be like giving a baby or a child like all the shit that I put in my body. That being said, I wouldn't give them like no fun. No, it's not even fun. It's like no like fake shit. My friend and I have a joke about donut parenting, like because her kids love Dunkin' Donuts, and she's like, it is fine. Like she's like, I was given Dunkin' Donuts as a child, I'm fine, you know? And
Yeah.
so now that there's such a focus, like a hyper focus, I think, on like organic and stuff. So, like, that being said, like, you know, not to never give myself like a donut, but like to not make a donut like lunch or whatever. And I don't know, it's been pretty revelatory for me to think about like, okay, I need to feed myself so that I can have energy. And like, how would I, like, if I were to treat myself like a baby or like a child, what would that look like? And it was pretty cool. It's
That
been
I
pretty
love
cool.
that. No, I love that. I'm so glad it's been useful. I mean, I think my trajectory with it was like a little bit different. Like, obviously, the grew up in the back of Arby's restaurant. So like I think part of my rebellion, like coming out of eating disorder recovery was like, oh, cool, cool. I got this. I'll like, eat more avocados, but like then I'm going to be, I was basically orthorexic or whatever. And I think that that's a whole nother like side of the pendulum, but also, have but then kind of came into the middle, or I don't know, somewhere in there, but it's easy to, one thing that I relate to that you said, that when it comes to eating emotionally, I guess, which I don't even really like love as a term, but this incredible person and friend in my life who people listening know if they've been listening, Isabel Foxen Duke, who talks about this topic so well. She says that eating our body size and how we eat isn't within our control. And I was like, excuse me, like, let me pull up the numbers here. But she has this really kind of radical perspective about it of like, just like whatever body is most difficult to attain is what's in vogue, right? And like cost the most resources and time. Similarly, like what our bodies are, if we really broaden it out, isn't within our control. Like all the little negotiations that I did and all the time it took for me to do, like my mom was always in a larger body since I was born. And, she was a single mom, like working, like didn't have time to do all the bullshit that I did, whether it was, from the avocado variety or like the counting and fake food variety, but like just had to truly, like you said, have the energy to like get through the day and continue. And so that helped me to take on Isabel's perspective of like, oh wow, this is a privilege, and this is not, and there are times when it's not in my control, when I truly have to just get through, or it changes and I'm unaware of it, or you break your leg and you can't walk, or whatever it is. And I think that times when I have eaten in a way that is closer to that definition that I read, I'll notice that emotionally, like, and this is the radical part about emotional eating that she says that, emotional eating is like it's your physical body's response to like needing more food for comfort. And chronic dieters like tend to want to eat more when they're uncomfortable and sad, and then people who haven't been chronic dieters tend to eat less, and that naturally, and their appetite. And so those things really were revelatory for me, and noticing like, oh, when I did eat enough, I wasn't wanting to turn to the food in a way that sometimes I would, in a like sort of self-harming sort of way, but other times like I didn't have like actual physical literal hunger,
Totally. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's still like ups and downs with all of it. Because I think that the other thing like about it being a harm reduction model is like less about the eating every day or however many times a day, and more for me that like you can take away the scale, you can ask to be turned around at the doctor, which I do, but you got to put your clothes on every day, and you'll notice when they are different. And you'll notice, something I wrote about once is like people would always say to me, you look so healthy. And I knew what they meant was like, you look bigger than the last time I saw you, And
yes,
when they say like, you're so tiny, I'm like, oh, I'm smaller than, like, you can't stop those things. And so it's a one that's hard to be like, not to like use the word sober from, but it's pretty constant.
totally. Yeah, no, I know. When someone says I look healthy, I'm like, oh.
I know. I know. I know. Well, you spoke about this with a little bit already, but with milk fed and longing for foods from your childhood, and realizing that some of the innocence that you longed for, I think you were mentioning, is like a little bit different. But can you talk a little bit about like where you are with that now, especially after milk fed has been out for a while, and after the shot, and after talking about food and eating and bodies for years within your work? Has the way that you think about that topic, has that shifted the way you think about the topic at all?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the thing about a novel is like a character comes to an arc and like a resolution. And like none of my novels end in a tight bow, but like there's character development and the character progresses. And then there's like being the writer who like goes on living after the last page, whereas the character doesn't. And so I would say I'm probably not as healed as Rachel but the protagonist of Milkfed when it comes to food. Although I don't know, this new niece revelation was a good one. But also it's funny because in Milkfed, Rachel tries to do like a 90-day detox from her mother, and she gets like pretty far. And like I recently tried to do a detox for my mother, and I think it lasted I'll go a week without talking to my mom, but it's never like when I've like stated that that's what I'm doing. And I had actually at one point I was like very upset with her, and I stated that that's what I was doing. And I think I lasted like 3 days, and I was like, wow, I can't believe Rachel lasted so long. And then I was like, oh yeah, she's imaginary.
I know. Yeah, it's tricky too, like with the food nostalgia thing of realizing like, have you ever had that where you are craving something food wise, and then realizing you're actually craving a feeling associated to it, or a time in your life with it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's right now it's Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. And it's when I think about Jewish New Year, the first thing I think about is my father always made the meal for like my extended family for Jewish New Year. And like, or I miss like my grandma's, like, she would make like it's funny because Rosh Hashanah, typically like the foods are like brisket and chicken, but my dad kind of did Rosh Hashanah like Thanksgiving, and then he was also made the meal for Thanksgiving. And so it was like we would have two Thanksgivings, like Rosh Hashanah, and then 2 months later we'd have like the same meal for Thanksgiving. Rosh Hashanah would include gefilte fish and matzo ball soup, and then it would be the Thanksgiving meal. So it was very funny, and pickles too. So it was like matzo ball soup, gefilte fish, and then like it was like a Thanksgiving dinner. And I was finding myself like yesterday, because I went to this very hippie synagogue I go to in California that I really like, and I found myself like just when I miss my father, like it's so intertwined with like my father's stuffing, or my father's potato recipe, like his fried potatoes recipe, or my favorite grandma's, like she would make this like cranberry jello. It was like this cranberry jello mold where it was like literally like canned cranberries in like a raspberry jello. It was so good. But, when I think of like that time of year, the first thing I think of is what they cooked.
Yeah, it's very visceral.
It's extremely visceral.
Yeah, I read somewhere recently too that smell is the most, like the sense that brings up the most nostalgia. But
that makes so much sense. It really connects you to the person. I have a couple of my dad's my dad was a smoker, so luckily, like not luckily, but like kind of like his clothes have a very distinct smell. Like you just can't get the Marlboro out. And I have like some of his t-shirts at my mom's house, like in a sealed bag. And then I also have a couple of his shirts here in LA, and like they still smell, and I'll save them like for special times. I'll like take them out from the bottom of the drawer and give them a sniff just to be like, Dad. And it's like it's so much more immediate. Even then, like I have some voicemails of his that I've like saved as recordings for my sister and I, and the smell is like the number one.
All right, that's my episode, part 1 of the conversation I recorded with Melissa Broder. Come back next week because, like I always say when I split these into 2 parts, things really come alive in part 2. It's about an hour plus in, we forget we're recording, we're a little looser, and that's, where Act 2 is where things take shape. So see you next week, same time, same place. So grateful that you're listening. I mentioned my zine either in this part or maybe it's in the next part, but if you want a copy of Pivot, the zine that I made this summer, and you've maybe heard about if you've been listening to the show on the last episode or the one before that, you can still get a copy. Just become a paid subscriber to my Substack and I'll mail you one. But it's also available at some bookstores in LA, and info on that and where to get hard copies of all of Melissa's books. Get yourself a hard copy or an audiobook. She reads them, which is also great. I love her, obviously, so check out her work for the 2 people who are new to her here. I'm sure you already know and love her as much as I do, and if you didn't before this, you probably do now. Okay, talk to you next week. Thank you again so much for listening. It means so much, and you know where to find me. This podcast is edited by Jeremiah.